Do you really need to work until 67 or 65? Or could you retire now or in the next couple of years? Well, it comes down to how much you have saved and whether or not that's enough combined with your other income sources like maybe a pension, rental income, or Social Security to provide the lifestyle and the financial security that you're going to want to have as a retiree. The other thing to look at is health insurance. Until you reach 65, this is something you'll have to take care of on your own. Once you're at 65, you're covered by Medicare, so it's less of a concern. But in the meantime, it's very expensive. And so figuring out how you can have affordable health insurance is a major concern and a priority for early retirement planning. The final thing to consider are taxes. You've worked your entire life, and if you've done a good job saving, you might face a situation as a retiree where hundreds of thousands of dollars of your savings will end up going towards paying taxes. So if there's a way that you can save money on taxes, increase your income, and be able to have more money for your, for your legacy, for your own financial security, that's pretty important. So in this video, we're going to jump into a case study for Joe and Tracy. They're 60 years old, and we're going to look at these issues for them to help you get an idea of how retiring early is very possible. So without any further ado, let's get right into this video. Joe and Tracy, they're 60 years old, they live in Florida, and they're wondering, well, can we retire now? Plan originally was just to work until age 65, 67, because that's when they would get Medicare and they'd qualify for full Social Security benefits. But is that really necessary? And if they worked extra years, of course, they would have more money, but is it worth it to have a couple extra $100,000 or to have a few $100s extra of income per month if they could retire now and cover what they need and have the type of lifestyle they want? So that's what we're going to look at in this video. The major things that I want to cover in this video are, what does financial security look like? How can you maximize your income as an early retiree? And then we're going to look at the major planning pain points for early retirees, which is, number one, how to take care of health insurance, and second, how to plan for taxes so that more of your money is going to you and to the things that you care about instead of going to taxes. Of course, we want to follow all the rules. We want to do everything within the law. But within that framework, are there some proactive things that you could do to just, save more money on taxes? So we're going to cover that in this video. So let's look at a financial overview for Joe and Tracy. Joe and Tracy have saved $1.5 million for retirement. Like I said, they're 60 years old, and we're going to look at what would retirement look like if they retired next month. Now, what are the other things we need to consider for their retirement income? They both qualify for Social Security benefits. Joe, if he waits until full retirement age 67, he'll receive $4,000 a month. And Tracy, if she waits until 67, she'll receive $3,200 a month. In addition to this, Tracy also has a small state pension. It'll be $1,000 a month, adjusted for inflation over time. So that will actually begin as soon as they retire, if she retires at age 60. So let's go to a plan overview here to give you kind of a broad picture of what that retirement would look like. So you can see here in this top left box, they've saved $1.5 million, and this corresponds with a monthly retirement paycheck. This is money in their checking account every month of $11,500. So how is this possible? If you've watched other videos, you've been studying retirement, you've likely heard of something called the 4% rule. And so, you don't need to be a math genius to say that, hey, $11,000 a month is more than 4%, is more than a 4% distribution rate from this portfolio. Well, there's more to it than that. So let's look at the cash flow to see where that money is coming from. Because yes, that distribution is high, but it ends up being sustainable because they don't have to do it for their entire retirement. So here we are on the chart. We have a timeline going from 2025 all the way out to 2061. And this is a monthly income number here on the left here is looking at. So this purple represents money from the portfolio. And you can see that in the beginning of retirement, most of their retirement income, $10,800 a month, is coming from the portfolio. And then Tracy, of course, has her $1,000 a month pension. As we go through time, you can see that here at age 62, Tracy would claim her Social Security benefit. And of course, by claiming early, she's going to receive a reduced amount. So instead of being $3,200, she would get about $2,370 per month. Now, if we go all the way out another 8 years till age 70, you can see here that Joe now claims Social Security, and that benefit would project it to be $5,870 per month. Now, that's because his regular benefit is $4,000 a month. Plus, we have a 8% bonus per year for the 3 years that he delays past age 67. On top of that, if you're following the math, he is also getting cost of living adjustments to that benefit. So whenever you look at your Social Security statement and you look at whatever that number is, age 62, age 67, age 70, those projected benefits, they don't take into account cost of living adjustments. So if you're 55 years old looking at your statement and you see a number, you have to map in, when you're doing a retirement projection, cost of living adjustments between whatever age you are and when you're going to claim that benefit. So it is going to be higher in the future. Cost of living adjustments are not guaranteed per se, but it's part of the Social Security law. So There's an automatic cost of living adjustment that's calculated each year. Even when you stop working and adding to the system, you're going to notice that benefit just keeps creeping up and up each year with a cost of living adjustment. You can see that once they've both claimed Social Security here, now all of a sudden, the amount of their overall income that's coming from their portfolio is actually very reasonable. It's very low. I mean, in fact, it ends up tapering off over time because the automatic cost of living adjustments from their Social Security and their pension end up doing all the work. And so basically, they'll reach a point where they no longer need to depend, they no longer have to pull from the portfolio. Looking at this, you might be asking, okay, so what does this mean for their legacy? Are they running out of money at this point? Is that really the plan? So on the screen here, we're looking at a legacy projection. Really what that means is how much do we expect for them to have in their portfolio? So they started with $1.5 million. How much is left over? So they have several years where they're taking out quite a bit per year. That tapers off over time. So how does that portfolio, what's it projected to look like over time? So all of these lines here, they represent different retirement, different retirement paths, if you will. What the software is doing is we're mapping their retirement spending plan against 155 years of market data, stock and bond returns. So we can look at their plan. How would it have held up during really great stock markets? We can look at their plan to see how it would have held up against times when the market was really great. We can also look at the exact opposite. What if their retirement, it has the worst stock market that we've seen over the last 155 years? And then, frankly, everything in between and maybe what would be most likely. So we can follow these different glide paths to kind of get a sense of maybe how strong their plan is and how it would test against these different market environments. And you can see a summary here at the bottom that probably what's most likely, the median outcome, is that they would have about $2.5 million at the end of their life. Now, we don't know when they'll pass away, but we're projecting out a really long life expectancy here past 35 years from the time they retire, which puts them in their mid-90s. If we look at the worst case scenario, even in that worst case scenario, they're still passing away with about $700,000 left over. And you know what? Sometimes the markets do really great and nobody knows how the markets are going to be over their particular retirement, which is why it's important to map your plan against lots of different scenarios to give you kind of a good sense of kind of maybe best case, worst case scenario. But if things went really well, it's possible they could, by the time they pass away, they would have over $5 million to be able to leave to their heirs. Now, their priorities. Leaving money to their children is not their number one priority. For them, it's kind of a nice, that would be nice to do, but not the priority. With their plan, they would leave about $2.5 million. So one thing that this then tells us is that, their plan's pretty safe. They have quite a bit of flexibility that they could maybe spend a little bit more and that they have a very low risk of needing to cut back in retirement. So you might ask, okay, how do you come to that determination? Deciding to spend more or spend less, how do you make those adjustments over time? Well, you need to have a framework for managing risk in retirement. And I use the guardrail approach. The guardrail approach essentially gives us an upper and lower limit for the portfolio that tells us when we might be able to increase our spending going forward above just regular cost of living adjustments. And on the flip side, when we might need to reduce spending to keep ourselves on the retirement highway, keep us on track. So you can see here on the left of the screen, we have their starting portfolio of $1.5 million, which corresponds with a gross monthly income of $11,800 a month. You can see that number is a little bit different from the one that we saw on the overview page. That's because that number is net after tax. This one is before taxes. Now, looking at the guardrails, let's say their portfolio dropped by about 20% down to $1.2 million. Well, then to keep them on the retirement highway moving forward, it would make sense for them to reduce their monthly spending by about 5%, $600 a month. On the flip side, let's say markets are doing well and their portfolio goes up by about 8%. Well, interesting, they could actually increase their monthly spending by about $1,000 a month. So an 8% increase in the portfolio corresponds with an 8% increase in income. You can see that this is kind of skewed to the positive. It doesn't require that much of an increase in the portfolio for them to have a pretty significant increase in spending. And on the flip side, they have to have a pretty meaningful drop in the portfolio in order for them to really recommend that they lower their spending. And in this case, it's only about 5%. So you can see this gives us a parameter as we go through time to know, are you on track with your spending? Could you afford to maybe spend a little bit more in a particular year, go on extra vacations, do something more, or do you maybe need to cut back just a little bit? So it just gives you a framework. And really, when it comes to planning for retirement, it's more than just having a plan that you just look at the beginning of your retirement that never adjusts or changes, right? Every plan needs to adjust to be flexible. And this is really a framework to know how to do that in a prudent, responsible way. Now that we've talked about their income, the next thing to look at are the two other major considerations for Joe and Tracy, which are taxes and health insurance. And like I said, every dollar you save in taxes, that's an extra dollar that you can have to spend or to do something else with it. So maybe more important for you. You earn the money, and so I'm just going to go ahead and take a stab in the dark and say that probably if you earn the money, you're probably the best equipped person to decide how that money ought to be spent. So let's look at different tax strategies for them. So as a retiree, you have different kind of tax planning tools compared to the different tools that you have as a working person. So as a retiree, you've got this bucket of retirement savings, and that we're, obviously, as you can look at the plan that we've been going over, you're going to be pulling out money each month. But you have within your discretion what types of accounts you're going to pull that from. Now, if you're retiring really early, you're going to have rules around early retirement penalties if you're pulling money from retirement accounts. And there's some rules or kind of some ways to get around that or plan for that are not relevant to this scenario. But of course, you can pull money out of your retirement accounts like an IRA or 401k. And when you do that, you're going to pay ordinary income tax. Also, like in the case of Joe and Tracy, they have saved money in a brokerage account. Now, most of that money has already been taxed. We do have to plan for taxes on dividends and interest and capital gains that they recognize, but most of the money they pull from that brokerage account is going to be tax-free because it's already been taxed. You don't pay out taxes on it twice. And so as a retiree then, it's kind of like trying to find that right balance of which account am I going to pull from in order to not just have the lowest taxes this year, but over the life of my retirement, how to have the lowest taxes. And of course, over time, their income sources are going to adjust. So right now, they have a small pension and portfolio. Later on, most of their income is going to come from Social Security. So taking that all into consideration, what's kind of the optimal approach? Well, we can use the software to try and look at different strategies for where to pull money from the portfolio to try and optimize for their taxes. And actually, the question about affordable health insurance, that also applies to taxes, because to qualify for less expensive health insurance under the Affordable Care Act is all dependent on your modified adjusted gross income. So if we can get that modified adjusted gross income down below a certain level, then you can qualify for significant subsidies. And we're going to look at that in just a minute. So first, staying just on taxes, what we're doing here is looking at a bunch of different scenarios to find one that makes sense given the different things they have to consider. So in their case, it looks like doing a Roth conversion strategy is actually going to save them quite a bit, almost 4% per year average in their tax rate, which over the life of their plan would save them about $485,000 of taxes. So correspondingly, they're looking at having an extra $485,000 of income, because those are dollars that are not going to taxes, so they can go to them. And it also results in them having a higher projected net legacy, money they're going to be able to leave behind, or frankly, just improving their overall financial security. So with this plan, we're looking at something called a Roth conversion. If you're not familiar with that, essentially what that means is proactively taking money out of an IRA account, paying taxes on it, and putting it into a Roth IRA, Roth conversion. And when you do that, of course, you're paying the taxes up front on that money, but then all of the gains, all of the dividends, all the interest income going forward, all happens tax-free. And a couple of other beneficial things is you don't have required minimum distributions on your Roth IRA money. So once you get past 75, you don't have to worry about taking money out of those accounts. You can just let it grow or take it out, as you please. You don't have those extra rules telling you how much you have to take out in any given year. You also have the benefit of being able to pass all that money on tax-free, or of course spending it tax-free, which is kind of the main benefit there. Now, as you look at this, you might say, all right, Mark, they're going to do Roth conversions. It's going to reduce the required distributions in the future. It's going to lower taxes overall. Well, why don't we just spend money out of the IRA and let the brokerage account grow, and that would reduce RMDs in the future, and then they'd have this brokerage account that's more tax efficient. Yeah, that's not necessarily a bad plan, but really the benefit to doing the Roth conversions is that, let me kind of break it down here. In the beginning of their retirement, they're going to live on most of their money they're pulling out of the portfolio is going to come from that brokerage account. And like I said, when they pull that money out, there's very little taxes on it. There's a little bit, but not so much. And that's going to allow them, in this case, I've set it in here that they're going to do about $60,000 a year of Roth conversion. So with that Roth conversion, now that money is going to be tax-free going forward. So essentially what we're doing is we're trading brokerage account money for Roth money. And Roth money is superior to brokerage account money because all the dividends, the interest, and capital gains are all tax-free, which is not the case with the brokerage account. So that's fundamentally why this, I think, is going to be a better approach for this retired couple. And likely in your situation, it's not always the case, but often it's the case that doing some Roth conversion within some limits will improve the tax efficiency of your retirement plan. So as you can see, saving quite a bit in taxes. Now, the 12% tax bracket, they have more room in the 12% tax bracket that they technically could convert more, but we have another consideration, which is healthcare. And for healthcare, we have a separate kind of bracket system that we have to look at to see how much of a subsidy you qualify for. So with the Affordable Care Act, which is the marketplace that's available to everybody if you're not covered by an employer and you're younger than age 65, you qualify for subsidies based on your income, based on the number of people in your household. So for a two-person household like Joe and Tracy, they can have up to 400% of the federal poverty line, which for them is about $82,000 a year. So if they are below that $82,000 a year mark, they're going to qualify for discounts. So if they're above it, they get none. If they're below it, they're going to get subsidies. So what kind of discounts, what kind of subsidies are we looking at? So based off of this income plan, what is realistic for their subsidies to actually be in retirement? How much money are we talking about saving here? So let's go to healthcare.gov. This is the federal website. So for the state of Florida, this is what you would use. Depending on the state you live, you might have a state healthcare exchange, but I'm going to walk you through step by step what this actually looks like. You can see this if you just Google healthcare.gov plan preview. You can go in and do this exact same thing like I've done to be able to get an estimate or have a sense of what your health insurance might look like as a retiree for your particular situation and where you live in the country. So we'll go ahead and start. I've already put in the information here for Orange County, Florida. Now, people in the household, you and other people. Okay, are you married? Yes. Dependents? None. Okay. So we've got Joe, 60 years old. None of these apply to him. And we have Tracy, who's also 60 years old. None of these apply to her. Continue. All right, confirming the household. Now it's going to ask about your income. Now, what this is specifically referring to is your modified adjusted gross income. It's different than the tax bracket numbers, and that's why I had to put some constraints on the Roth conversion. We're trying to target the 12% bracket, but actually, if we go to 12% taxable income, it's actually above the 400% poverty line. So I put it in here. I put in their plan manually that we would keep it a little bit below, doing Roth conversions of about $60,000 a year. So that's going to add to this. Plus they've got their pension, so that's going to add to that. And so I'm going to put in here of about $70,000 per year of modified adjusted gross income. And you can see here that if they hit that income target, they're going to qualify for a monthly tax credit of $1,811. Now, what does that mean? Essentially what it means is they can now look and shop for plans in their area, and whatever the sticker price is on that health insurance plan, they can take $1,800 a month off of that price. So let's look at some actual plans. All right, so here we are looking for their area. And we're looking at first a high deductible plan here from AM Better Health. This plan used to be $1,755 a month, but with that $1,800 a month tax credit, their monthly premium would be zero. So we can go through and just look at different healthcare providers, different plans available, and you can sort on the website by plan features. You can even put in your doctors or even prescriptions that you might be on to try and find plans that really sync up with your own personal situation. But essentially, this is how you can go about investigating what healthcare costs could look like. So you can see that with high deductible plans, very realistic, that they could have a plan $50, $89 a month. All of a sudden, this makes health insurance extremely affordable in retirement as a retiree with proper planning. Now, imagine if they just went ahead and retired without looking into this, and they were taking all of their money out of their IRA account, or maybe they heard about Roth conversions and thought, hey, that'd be a good idea, and they did some of that on top of it. Well, all of a sudden, you could see them being in a situation where instead of paying $0 a month, they're paying an extra $1,800 a month of expense, which turns out to be an extra $21,000 a year. And for them, they're looking at 5 years in retirement where they need to pay for their own health insurance before Medicare. So this is a difference of in their case, $100,000, over $100,000, just based off of smart planning of where you're pulling your money from in retirement. So going back to their overall plan, we can add that on and say, okay, if they do that, we can add that tax savings on and say, you know what, through this smart planning, their tax savings isn't, it's not actually about $485,000. It's more like $585,000 if we add on the savings that they're going to get from their health insurance savings. Now, at the end of the day, when it comes to retirement, you're retiring not because you want to figure out how to pay the least amount of taxes or trying to figure out how to have low-cost health insurance. You're retiring so you can live your life. And to live your life, usually what that means is you need to have income. So you can see here, their monthly income is $11,500 a month. So how does that make sense with having a modified adjusted gross income of $70,000 and all this tax planning I'm talking about? Well, this is where the smart tax planning in retirement comes from. You can have a certain amount of monthly cash flow that's here, but then on paper for taxes and for health insurance, your income is down here, which allows you to qualify for these programs. So this is all possible, and it all depends on your mix of assets, your mix of investment sources, and some smart planning. You can proactively be saving tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes as a retiree. So for Joe and Tracy, you can see that all of a sudden, working longer, for them, now they really have to come up with some good reasons to keep working. They're going to be able to have the monthly income they want, figured out how to have affordable health insurance, and we know that there's some realistic ways for them to reduce taxes over their entire life and still have significant income and financial security. So hopefully going through this case study, this gives you some really good ideas about how smart proactive planning can help you to retire sooner than you thought might have been possible. Again, I'll ask you, why are you going to work until you're 65 or 67? Every single year, get a little bit older, our bodies break down a little bit more. There's certain things we can't do every single year that we could have done if we retired sooner. So hopefully this gives you some good ideas. And if you'd like some help going through your situation, looking at what might be possible for your own early retirement, click the link in the description. I'd be happy to sit down with a one-on-one meeting and look over your situation to give you some ideas and maybe even help you put together a plan that gives you the financial security that you're looking for in retirement. So until next time, I really hope you have a great week, and I will see you next week in the next video. Take care.